Maya Johnson stirred her lukewarm coffee for the third time, watching the cream swirl into patterns that reminded her of storm clouds. The corner table at Celestial Cafe had become her regular spot over the past 6 months, tucked away where she could eat in peace without curious stares or unwanted conversations. At 24, she had grown tired of explaining why she preferred solitude to the forced socializing that came with shared meals. The cafe buzzed with the usual morning crowd. Business people tapped frantically on laptops while gulping down overpriced lattes. College students huddled over textbooks, cramming for exams with dark circles under their eyes. Young mothers juggled crying babies and cold breakfast sandwiches. Maya observed them all with the detached interest of someone who had learned to find entertainment in other people's chaos. She pulled out her worn paperback novel, its spine cracked from repeated readings. The bookmark fell to the floor, and, as she bent to retrieve it, she noticed expensive Italian leather shoes stepping closer to her table. Maya straightened slowly, her eyes traveling up pressed charcoal pants, a perfectly tailored navy blazer, and, finally, landing on a face that belonged in magazine spreads. The man standing beside her table had sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, deep brown eyes that seemed to hold secrets, and black hair styled with casual perfection. His presence commanded attention without effort, the kind of natural magnetism that made conversations stop and heads turn. Maya recognized him immediately, though she had never seen him in person before. Alexander Sterling, tech billionaire, media darling, the man whose face graced business magazine covers and whose dating life provided endless fodder for gossip columns. He was younger than she had expected, maybe 32 or 33, with laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than his serious public image implied. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. "Would you mind if I sat down? Everywhere else seems to be taken." Maya glanced around the cafe. At least 6 empty tables were scattered throughout the space, including a prime spot by the window that any normal person would have chosen over her cramped corner. She raised an eyebrow but gestured to the chair across from her. "Sure, but I'm not exactly chatty company," she warned, already regretting her politeness. The last thing she wanted was to become part of whatever game rich men played when they decided to slum it with ordinary people. Alexander settled into the chair with fluid grace, folding his hands on the small table. "I'm Alexander, by the way." "Alex, I know who you are," Maya replied dryly, not bothering to introduce herself in return. She had no intention of encouraging this interaction beyond basic civility. His eyebrows rose slightly, but instead of the arrogance she expected, his expression showed genuine surprise. "Most people pretend they don't recognize me. They think it makes them seem cooler. I'm not most people." Maya took a deliberate bite of her blueberry muffin, hoping he would take the hint and find somewhere else to conduct whatever business had brought him to this unremarkable neighborhood cafe. "No," Alex said thoughtfully, studying her face with uncomfortable intensity. "You're definitely not." Maya had inherited her grandmother's high cheekbones and her mother's stubborn chin, creating a face that photographers had once called striking during her brief and disastrous modeling stint in college. Her dark skin had a warm undertone that glowed even in the cafe's harsh fluorescent lighting, and her natural hair formed a crown of tight curls that she had finally learned to love after years of fighting with relaxers and flat irons. But she had also learned that beauty could be as much a burden as a blessing, especially when men like Alexander Sterling decided you were worth their attention. She had no interest in becoming another notch on a billionaire's bedpost or a brief footnote in his inevitable biography. "Look," Maya said, closing her book with more force than necessary. "I don't know what this is about, but I'm really not interested in whatever you're selling. I just want to eat my breakfast and read my book in peace." Alex leaned back in his chair, and, for a moment, his carefully composed mask slipped. Maya caught a glimpse of something unexpected beneath the polished exterior. Exhaustion, maybe, or loneliness. It disappeared so quickly, she almost thought she had imagined it. "I'm not selling anything," he said quietly. "I just noticed you eating alone, and I thought maybe you'd appreciate some company. I eat alone a lot too." Something in his tone made Maya look at him more carefully. The expensive clothes and perfect grooming couldn't quite hide the shadows under his eyes or the way his shoulders carried tension like a physical weight. She had seen that look before, in her own mirror during the worst months after her father's death, when grief had felt like drowning in slow motion. "Billionaires don't eat alone," she said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. "They have assistants and business partners and socialite girlfriends to keep them company." "Not this one," Alex signaled the waitress, who practically sprinted over with the kind of eager attention that came from recognizing someone with more money than most people saw in a lifetime. "Could I get a coffee, black, and whatever pastry you'd recommend?" The waitress, a college-aged blonde whose name tag read Jessica, giggled nervously. "Oh my God, of course. We have amazing croissants. Or maybe you'd like our signature cinnamon rolls. They're locally famous." "Well, not like you're famous, but you know what I mean. A croissant sounds perfect," Alex interrupted gently, saving Jessica from further embarrassment. "Thank you." Maya watched this exchange with growing curiosity. She had expected arrogance, the casual dismissal of service workers that seemed to come naturally to people with unlimited resources.
What?
Instead, Alex treated Jessica with the same polite attention he might give a business partner, even remembering to say please and thank you. "So," Maya said once Jessica had bounced away to fetch his order, "what's a billionaire doing in a neighborhood cafe at 8:30 on a Tuesday morning? Don't you people have personal chefs and private dining rooms?" "You keep saying you people, like billionaires are a different species," Alex observed with what might have been amusement. "We're just regular people who happen to have more zeros in our bank accounts." Maya snorted. "Right. I'm sure you clip coupons and worry about rent like the rest of us regular people." "I worried about rent once," he said, his voice taking on a distant quality. "There was a winter in college when I lived on ramen noodles and library sandwiches because I couldn't afford both food and heating. I remember what it feels like to count every dollar." There was no self-pity in his tone, just matter-of-fact honesty that caught Maya off guard. She studied his face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but found only tired sincerity. "What happened to change all that?" she asked despite herself. "I built something people wanted to buy," Alex said simply. "Got lucky with timing and smart with partnerships." The usual startup fairy tale, except most of those stories end with failure instead of IPOs. Jessica returned with his coffee and croissant, setting them down with theatrical care before reluctantly retreating to her other customers. Alex took a sip of coffee and made a slight face at its obvious poor quality, but didn't complain. "You still haven't answered my question," Maya pointed out. "What brings Alexander Sterling to my corner of the universe?" Alex was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in slow circles on its saucer. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low she had to lean forward to hear him. "I was driving around at 6 this morning because I couldn't sleep. Again, I saw this place and remembered what it felt like to be normal, so I parked and came in. I've been sitting here for 2 hours, watching people live their ordinary lives and trying to remember what that felt like." Maya felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of pain that mirrored her own. She knew about sleepless nights and the way grief could make you feel like a stranger in your own life. She knew about sitting in public spaces and watching other people's happiness like it was a foreign language you had once spoken fluently. "Insomnia is a bitch," she said softly, surprising herself with the admission. "It is," Alex agreed, and for the first time since he had sat down, his smile looked completely genuine. "Especially when you have 8 meetings before lunch and need to pretend you're not running on 3 hours of sleep and pure caffeine." "Why can't you sleep?" Maya asked, then immediately regretted the question. She didn't want to encourage intimacy with a stranger, especially one whose net worth could probably buy her entire neighborhood. But Alex didn't seem to find her question intrusive. If anything, he looked relieved to be asked something real instead of the usual surface-level pleasantries that probably filled most of his conversations. "My father died 3 months ago," he said quietly. "Heart attack at 58. He spent his whole life building Sterling Industries, working 18-hour days, and missing family dinners because the company always came first. And now I'm doing exactly the same thing, and I can't figure out if I'm honoring his legacy or repeating his mistakes." Maya's coffee cup rattled against its saucer as she set it down too quickly. The parallel was too close, too familiar. Her father had died of a stroke at 55, collapsing in his law office after pulling another all-nighter preparing for a case that had seemed more important than sleep or family time. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. "Losing a parent changes everything." "It does," Alex agreed, studying her face with new attention. "You sound like you know. My dad died 2 years ago. Stroke." Maya surprised herself by continuing. "He was a lawyer, worked constantly, always promised he'd slow down after the next big case. The next big case killed him." They sat in silence for a moment, connected by shared grief and the strange intimacy of mutual understanding. Maya felt the familiar ache in her chest that came with talking about her father, but also something else, relief, maybe, at speaking with someone who understood the particular weight of losing a parent to their own ambition. "Do you think they would have changed if they'd known?" Alex asked. "If they'd known they only had a few more years, do you think they would have chosen differently?" It was the question Maya had been asking herself for 24 months. The one that kept her awake during the early morning hours when grief felt sharp enough to cut. She had rehearsed a dozen different answers, but, sitting across from Alex Sterling in a corner cafe, only honesty felt adequate. "I don't know," she admitted. "I used to think yes, but now I think maybe they couldn't help themselves. Maybe working was the only way they knew how to show love, even if it meant there was no time left for the people they were working to provide for." Alex nodded slowly, as if she had given voice to something he had been struggling to articulate. "My father used to say he was building something that would last, something bigger than himself. I never understood what he meant until I inherited it all and realized I had no idea how to carry that weight." "Maybe the weight isn't yours to carry," Maya suggested. Then, immediately wondered why she was offering advice to a man who probably had teams of therapists and life coaches at his disposal. But Alex leaned forward, his full attention focused on her words. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe you don't have to become your father to honor him. Maybe you can build something different, something that includes time for the people who matter." Alex stared at her for a long moment, and Maya had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing past all her carefully constructed walls to something vulnerable underneath. She picked up her book, ready to retreat behind the familiar barrier of fiction, but his next words stopped her cold. "Would you like to have dinner with me?" he asked quietly. Maya's first instinct was to laugh. The idea of Alexander Sterling asking her, a graduate student who clipped coupons and ate ramen 3 nights a week, out to dinner was so absurd it felt like a joke. But his expression was serious, almost nervous, and she realized he was waiting for her answer with the kind of tension that suggested her response mattered more than politeness required. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said carefully. "We're from completely different worlds." "Maybe that's exactly why it would be a good idea," Alex countered. "When was the last time someone told you the truth about yourself without worrying about what they could gain from it?" Maya considered this. In her experience, most people wanted something, references for jobs, introductions to other people, favors that seemed small until they accumulated into obligations. The few men who had asked her out in recent years had usually revealed ulterior motives within a few dates, whether it was sex, social media bragging rights, or simply the challenge of winning over someone who seemed uninterested. But what could Alexander Sterling possibly want from her that he couldn't buy or command or charm from someone more suitable to his station? The question intrigued her almost as much as it worried her. "I'm not looking for a relationship," she said finally. "I'm not looking for anything, really. I like my life simple and uncomplicated." "So do I," Alex said, and something in his tone suggested he was telling the truth. "Maybe we could be simple and uncomplicated together. Just dinner. Just conversation. No expectations beyond good food and honest company." Maya found herself wavering, caught between caution and curiosity. There was something appealing about the idea of spending an evening with someone who understood grief and insomnia, someone who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts rather than her appearance or availability. "One dinner," she heard herself saying. "Somewhere normal. Not some 5-star restaurant where I'll need to worry about using the right fork." Alex's smile was brilliant, transforming his face from merely handsome to genuinely beautiful. "I know just the place. There's a little Italian restaurant in Brooklyn that makes the best carbonara I've ever had." No tablecloths, no pretension, just good food and terrible wine. That sounds perfect, Maya said, then immediately wondered what she had just agreed to. They exchanged numbers, and Alex insisted on paying for both their meals despite Maya's protests. As he stood to leave, he paused beside her chair. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for the conversation, for the honesty. I haven't talked about my father with anyone who didn't immediately try to tell me how to grieve or how to run my company." "Thank you for asking real questions," Maya replied. "Most people assume that because I eat alone, I must be lonely. Are you? Lonely, I mean." Maya considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But I've learned there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. Being alone is a choice. Being lonely is what happens when you're surrounded by people who don't really see you." Alex nodded as if her words confirmed something he had already suspected. "I'll call you tomorrow about dinner." "Okay," Maya said, and watched him walk away, noting how conversations seemed to pause as he passed, and how the waitress Jessica followed his progress with obvious admiration. Maya sat in the quiet aftermath of their conversation, stirring her now-cold coffee and trying to understand what had just happened. She had built her life around routines and boundaries, carefully controlled interactions that kept her safe from disappointment and heartbreak. Alexander Sterling represented the kind of complication she had spent 2 years avoiding. But, as she replayed their conversation, she found herself remembering not his wealth or status, but the tired honesty in his eyes when he talked about his father. She thought about the way he had treated Jessica with genuine kindness, and how he had listened to her thoughts about grief without trying to fix or minimize her feelings. Maya stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, second-guessing her outfit choice for the third time in 20 minutes. The black dress was simple but elegant, hitting just above her knees and hugging her curves without being too revealing. She had paired it with her grandmother's pearl earrings and comfortable flats, striking what she hoped was the right balance between effort and casualness. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alex, running 5 minutes late. "Traffic in Brooklyn is apparently designed by sadists." Maya smiled despite her nerves. Over the past 3 days since their cafe encounter, they had exchanged a dozen texts that felt surprisingly natural. Alex wrote like he spoke, direct and honest, with occasional flashes of dry humor that caught her off guard. He had sent her the restaurant address along with a warning that the decor looked like someone's Italian grandmother had decorated it in 1987 and never updated anything. "No problem," she typed back. "I'm still deciding if I have the courage to actually show up. I'll wait as long as it takes," came his immediate response, followed by another message. "But I should probably mention that the owner recognizes me and has already promised to seat us in the back corner where we won't be disturbed. Also, I may have accidentally ordered wine for the table. Hope that's okay." Maya laughed out loud, remembering his promise of terrible wine. The fact that he had thought ahead about privacy touched her more than she wanted to admit. In her limited experience with men, thoughtfulness was usually performative, lasting only until they got what they wanted. 20 minutes later, Maya stood outside Nana's kitchen, a narrow storefront wedged between a dry cleaner and a used bookstore. The restaurant looked exactly as Alex had described: red checkered tablecloths, fake ivy hanging from plastic trellises, and photographs of the Amalfi Coast that had probably been printed from Google Images. Through the window, she could see Alex already seated at a corner table, reading something on his phone with intense concentration. Maya took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The smell of garlic and oregano hit her immediately, along with the sound of Frank Sinatra playing softly in the background. An elderly woman with steel-gray hair and kind eyes approached her with a knowing smile. "You must be Maya," the woman said in accented English. "Alexander told me to watch for a beautiful girl who would probably try to run away the moment she saw the place. I'm Rosa, and this is my restaurant." "It's lovely," Maya said honestly. There was something charming about the restaurant's unapologetic authenticity, like stepping into someone's actual home rather than a carefully designed dining experience. Rosa led her to the corner table where Alex stood as she approached. He had traded his business attire for dark jeans and a simple gray sweater that somehow made him look both more relaxed and more dangerous. Maya felt her pulse quicken and immediately ordered herself to calm down. "You came," Alex said, his relief evident as he pulled out her chair. I was maybe 40% sure you would actually show up. I keep my promises, Maya replied, settling into her seat. Even when they terrify me. What terrifies you about dinner? Alex asked, genuine curiosity in his voice as he poured wine from a carafe that looked like it might have been recycled from someone's kitchen cabinet. Maya accepted the wine and took a sip, making a face at its aggressive sweetness. This is definitely terrible wine. The worst I've ever had, Alex agreed cheerfully. Rosa makes it herself from grapes she grows in her backyard in Queens. She's very proud of it. Then, we'll drink every drop and tell her it's wonderful, Maya said, taking another sip with determined enthusiasm. To answer your question, I'm terrified of dinner because I don't understand what you want from me. Alex set down his wine glass and leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. What do you think I want? I don't know, Maya admitted. That's the problem. In my experience, when someone like you pays attention to someone like me, it's usually because they want something specific, sex, novelty, the thrill of slumming it with regular people. I can't figure out your angle. What if I don't have an angle? Alex asked. What if I just enjoyed talking to you and wanted to do it again over better food than gas station pastries? Maya studied his face, looking for signs of deception. People like you always have an angle. It's how you become people like you. Fair point, Alex conceded. But maybe my angle is exactly what I said it was. Good food and honest company. Maybe I'm tired of conversations that feel like chess matches where everyone is 3 moves ahead, and nobody says what they actually mean. Rosa appeared at their table with a basket of bread that smelled like heaven and looked homemade. You two are too serious for dinner, she scolded gently. This is a place for happiness, for celebrating life. Alexander, you tell her about the carbonara. Maya, you tell him about yourself. Food brings people together, not all this thinking. She bustled away before either of them could respond, leaving them with warm bread and the faint embarrassment of being mothered by a stranger. Maya tore off a piece of bread and tried not to moan at its perfect texture. Rosa has strong opinions about how people should behave in her restaurant, Alex explained. She's been trying to marry off her grandson to every single woman under 30 who walks through that door. I think she's adopted me as a secondary project. How long have you been coming here? Maya asked. About 6 months. I discovered it by accident when I was driving around one of those sleepless nights. Rosa fed me enough pasta to put me in a carb coma, and I slept better that night than I had in weeks. I've been coming back ever since. Maya felt a twinge of something that might have been jealousy. The image of Alex sitting alone in this cozy restaurant, being fussed over by Rosa while he struggled with grief and insomnia, made her chest tight in a way she didn't want to examine too closely. Do you come here with other people? She asked, then immediately regretted the question. She didn't want to sound possessive about someone she barely knew. You're the first person I've brought here, Alex said quietly. I've never wanted to share it before. It felt too personal. The weight of that admission settled between them, heavier than Maya had expected. She realized that this restaurant represented something private and vulnerable for Alex, a sanctuary he had created during the worst period of his grief. The fact that he had chosen to share it with her felt both precious and terrifying. Thank you, she said simply, for sharing this with me. Thank you for being worth sharing it with. Rosa returned with 2 enormous plates of carbonara that looked like they could feed a small family. The pasta glistened with egg and cheese and tiny pieces of pancetta, and the smell made Maya's mouth water immediately. Rosa, Alex said solemnly, this looks incredible. Of course it looks incredible, Rosa replied with mock indignation. You think I would serve you anything less than incredible? You eat, you enjoy, you tell me it's the best carbonara in Brooklyn. It's the best carbonara in Brooklyn, Maya said after her first bite, and she wasn't exaggerating. The dish was rich and creamy without being heavy, perfectly seasoned, and obviously made with the kind of love that couldn't be faked. Rosa beamed and patted Maya's shoulder approvingly before disappearing back into the kitchen. Maya found herself relaxing for the first time all evening, the combination of good food and Alex's easy conversation melting away her defensive walls. Tell me about yourself, Alex said, echoing Rosa's earlier instruction. What do you do when you're not reading novels in corner cafes? I'm a graduate student at Columbia, Maya said. Getting my PhD in African American literature. I'm writing my dissertation on the intersection of grief and identity in contemporary fiction. That sounds fascinating and emotionally exhausting, Alex observed. How do you study grief academically without letting it consume you personally? Maya paused with her fork halfway to her mouth, struck by the insight of his question. Most people asked about her career prospects or whether she planned to become a professor, treating her studies like a job interview rather than a calling. It's a delicate balance, she admitted. Sometimes the academic distance helps me understand my own grief better. Other times, reading about other people's pain feels like salt in an open wound. But I think there's value in examining how we process loss through storytelling. Is that why you were reading fiction at the cafe? Research. Pleasure reading, Maya said. I need stories that have nothing to do with death or loss sometimes. Just to remember that literature can be an escape instead of an examination. Alex nodded thoughtfully. What's your escape book of choice? Romance novels, Maya said, then laughed at his surprised expression. I know, it's completely different from my academic work, but I love stories where people find each other and choose happiness despite all the obstacles in their way. There's something hopeful about the promise of a happy ending. Do you believe in happy endings? Alex asked. In real life, I mean. Maya considered the question while she twirled pasta around her fork. I think I believe in happy moments. Strings of happiness that can add up to a meaningful life, even if nothing lasts forever. What about you? I used to believe in building things that would outlast me, Alex said slowly. Legacy, permanence, making a mark that would matter long after I was gone. But lately, I think you might be right about moments. Maybe the goal isn't to build something eternal, but to collect enough good moments to make the temporary time we have worthwhile. They talked through 2 servings of carbonara and most of the terrible wine, their conversation ranging from books to travel to embarrassing childhood memories. Maya learned that Alex had taught himself to code at age 12, that he spoke 3 languages badly instead of 1 perfectly, and that he had once spent a summer working construction just to prove to his father that he understood physical labor. Alex discovered that Maya had been a competitive swimmer in high school, that she made the best chocolate chip cookies in Manhattan according to her neighbor Mrs. Peterson, and that she had briefly considered dropping out of graduate school to become a professional food critic before realizing she couldn't afford to eat at the restaurants she would need to review. What changed your mind about the food critic career? Alex asked as Rosa brought them complimentary tiramisu that looked like a work of art. Honestly, I calculated how much money I'd need to survive in New York while building a freelance writing career, and the number was terrifying, Maya said. I'm good at research and analysis, but I'm not good at financial risk. My parents sacrificed too much for my education for me to throw it away on a dream that might not pay the bills. What if money weren't an issue? Alex pressed. If you could do anything without worrying about practical concerns, what would you choose? Maya took a bite of tiramisu and let the question settle in her mind. I think I'd want to write. Not academic papers or dissertations, but stories that matter to people. Maybe novels, maybe journalism, maybe something that doesn't exist yet. I'd want to tell stories that help people feel less alone in their experiences. That sounds like exactly what the world needs, Alex said softly. Stories that create connection instead of division. What about you? Maya asked. If you could do anything without worrying about legacy or shareholders or board meetings, what would you choose? Alex was quiet for so long that Maya wondered if she had asked the wrong question. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I think I'd want to teach, he said. Maybe computer science, maybe entrepreneurship. Something where I could help young people build their own dreams instead of just inheriting someone else's vision. I'd want to create opportunities for kids who think success is impossible because they don't have the right connections or the right background. Maya felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition of kindness that went deeper than charm or attraction. The idea of Alexander Sterling wanting to teach, to give back rather than simply accumulate more wealth, revealed a side of him that she hadn't expected to find. Why don't you do that? She asked. You have enough money to do whatever you want. You could start a foundation, build schools, create scholarship programs. Because I'm terrified of disappointing the people who depend on Sterling Industries, Alex admitted. We employ over 15,000 people. My decisions affect their mortgages, their kids' college funds, their retirement plans. How do I risk their security for my own fulfillment? Maya reached across the table and touched his hand briefly, a gesture of comfort that surprised them both. Maybe the goal isn't to choose between their security and your happiness. Maybe it's finding a way to honor both. Alex turned his hand palm up, capturing her fingers before she could pull away. His touch was warm and steady, calloused in a way that suggested he hadn't always worked behind a desk. You make everything sound possible. You make everything sound more complicated than it needs to be, Maya countered. But she didn't pull her hand away. Sometimes the simplest solution is the right one, even if it's not the most obvious. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, hands linked across the table while Rosa hummed in the kitchen and Frank Sinatra crooned about New York. Maya felt the dangerous warmth of connection, the temptation to believe that this beautiful, wounded man might actually be as genuine as he seemed. I should probably get going, Maya said reluctantly, finally, extracting her hand from his. I have an early class tomorrow, and I still need to review my notes. Of course, Alex said, signaling Rosa for the check. Can I drive you home? I can take the subway, Maya protested. You don't need to go out of your way. Maya, Alex said gently, I want to drive you home. Not because I think you can't manage on your own, but because I'd like to extend this evening as long as possible. Is that okay? Maya nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. The simple honesty of his request undid something inside her that had been carefully knotted for months. Alex's car turned out to be a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Maya's annual stipend. But he drove it like a regular person, navigating Brooklyn traffic with practiced ease while jazz played softly from hidden speakers. They talked about music and movies during the drive, safe topics that let them avoid the weightier conversations that had dominated dinner. When he pulled up outside her apartment building, a converted brownstone that had seen better decades, Alex turned off the engine and looked at her seriously. I had a wonderful time tonight, he said. I know this is complicated, and I know we're from different worlds, but I'd like to see you again, if you're willing. Maya studied his face in the dim light from the street lamp, searching for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But she found only hope and uncertainty, the expression of someone who had offered something precious and was waiting to learn whether it would be accepted or rejected. I'd like that too, Maya heard herself saying. But I need you to understand something. I'm not interested in being your charity case or your walk on the wild side. If we're going to do this, whatever this is, I need it to be real. I wouldn't want it any other way, Alex said firmly. You're not a charity case, Maya. You're the most interesting person I've met in years, and I'm hoping you might give me the chance to prove that I'm worthy of your time. Maya smiled, feeling the last of her resistance crumble in the face of his sincerity. One step at a time, Alexander Sterling. One step at a time. She kissed his cheek quickly before climbing out of the car, a gesture that felt both bold and natural. As she walked toward her building, she heard him call her name softly. Maya. When she turned, he was leaning out the driver's side window, his expression vulnerable in a way that made her chest tight. Thank you. For dinner, for conversation, for giving me a chance I probably don't deserve. Thank you for the best carbonara in Brooklyn, Maya replied. And for proving that terrible wine tastes better with good company. She watched him drive away before climbing the 3 flights to her apartment, her mind already racing with the implications of what had just happened. Maya had built her life around careful choices and safe boundaries. But Alexander Sterling represented the kind of beautiful risk that could either heal her heart or break it completely. 3 weeks into whatever was happening between them, Maya stood in the lobby of Sterling Industries feeling completely out of place. The building stretched 47 floors toward the sky, all glass and steel and the kind of modern architecture that seemed designed to intimidate rather than welcome. She had dressed carefully in her best blazer and most professional shoes, but she still felt like an imposter among the suited executives who moved through the space with purposeful confidence. Alex had invited her to see his world after weeks of meeting on neutral ground, coffee shops, bookstores, the occasional museum where they could walk and talk without the pressure of formal dining. Maya had been curious about the empire he had inherited, the weight of responsibility that kept him awake at night. But now that she was here, She wondered if she was ready for this glimpse behind the curtain. Maya Johnson for Alexander Sterling, she told the receptionist, a polished woman whose makeup looked professionally applied and whose smile seemed practiced to perfection. Of course, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Sterling is expecting you. Please take the express elevator to the 47th floor. His assistant will meet you there. The elevator ride felt endless, even though it probably lasted less than 2 minutes. Maya watched the floor numbers climb and tried to calm her racing heart. Through the glass walls, she could see the city spread out below like a detailed map, people and cars reduced to abstract patterns by distance and height. The elevator doors opened to reveal a reception area that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Fresh flowers arranged in crystal vases, artwork that probably cost more than Maya's annual income, and furniture that whispered expensive taste rather than shouting wealth. A woman in her 30s with kind eyes and an efficient manner approached with a welcoming smile. Ms. Johnson? I'm Sarah Chun, Mr. Sterling's executive assistant. He's just finishing up a conference call, but he asked me to give you a quick tour while you wait. Sarah led Maya through a maze of offices and conference rooms, explaining the company's structure with the kind of easy expertise that came from years of experience. Sterling Industries had started as a software development firm, but had expanded into renewable energy, educational technology, and sustainable manufacturing. The walls were lined with awards for innovation and corporate responsibility, photos of ribbon-cutting ceremonies and charity events, evidence of a company that seemed genuinely committed to making positive change. Alex, Mr. Sterling, completely restructured the company after his father passed, Sarah explained as they paused outside a conference room where a dozen people were engaged in animated discussion around a table covered with prototype devices. He shifted focus from pure profit maximization to sustainable growth and social impact. Some of the board members weren't thrilled with the transition, but the results have been remarkable. Maya watched through the glass walls as the meeting participants tested what looked like educational tablets, their faces bright with excitement. What are they working on? A new initiative to provide free technology and internet access to underserved schools, Sarah said with obvious pride. Alex's idea. He wants to eliminate the digital divide that prevents kids from accessing the same educational opportunities regardless of their zip code. Something warm and proud bloomed in Maya's chest, the recognition that Alex's dreams of teaching and creating opportunities weren't just fantasy. They were becoming reality through the resources at his disposal. She had wondered how someone with his wealth and power chose to use both, and this felt like an answer that aligned with the man she had come to know over late-night conversations and shared meals. He's ready to see you now, Sarah announced after checking her phone. Fair warning, he's been nervous about this visit all morning. I think he's worried about what you'll think of all this. She gestured broadly at the luxurious surroundings. Maya followed Sarah to a corner office that managed to be both impressive and unexpectedly personal. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city, but Alex's desk was cluttered with papers and coffee cups in a way that suggested actual work rather than executive theater. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with everything from business texts to literary fiction, and Maya spotted several titles from her own academic reading list. Alex stood as she entered, and Maya was struck again by how different he looked in his natural environment. The expensive suit fit him perfectly, emphasizing broad shoulders and confident posture, but his tie was slightly loosened, and his hair looked like he had been running his hands through it. He seemed simultaneously more powerful and more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. "You came," he said, the relief in his voice suggesting he hadn't been entirely certain she would follow through on their plans. "You invited me to see your world," Maya replied. "I'm curious about what drives someone to build all this." She gestured toward the windows and the sprawling city beyond. "Honestly, most days I feel like I'm drowning in it rather than driving it," Alex admitted, moving to close the office door behind Sarah. "But I'm glad you're here. I wanted you to understand what I'm working with, what I'm trying to change." Maya walked to the windows and looked down at the street below, where people moved like ants along predetermined paths. From this height, individual struggles and dreams became invisible, reduced to patterns of traffic and commerce. She could understand how easy it would be to lose sight of human impact when decisions were made from this removed perspective. Sarah told me about the education initiative, Maya said, providing technology to underserved schools. Alex joined her at the window, standing close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive that had become familiar over their weeks together. It's a start. We're piloting the program in 50 schools across 5 states, with plans to expand if the results are positive. But sometimes I wonder if it's enough, or if I'm just putting expensive band-aids on systemic problems. Progress doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful, Maya said. Those kids will have access to resources they wouldn't have had otherwise. That matters. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Maya nodded, remembering her own childhood in a neighborhood where outdated textbooks and broken computers were the norm. I went to schools where we shared textbooks, and the library computers crashed every 20 minutes. Access to technology wasn't just about convenience. It was about being able to imagine futures that seemed possible instead of impossible. Alex turned to face her fully, his expression intense. What would you do? If you had unlimited resources to fix education inequality, what would your approach be? Maya was quiet for a moment, considering not just the question, but the weight of being asked. In her experience, wealthy people rarely asked for genuine input from those who had lived the problems they wanted to solve. They preferred to fund solutions that made them feel good rather than addressing root causes that might implicate their own privilege. I'd start with teacher support, Maya said finally. Technology is great, but it's meaningless without educators who are trained, supported, and paid enough to stay in the profession. You can't fix systemic problems with gadgets if the human infrastructure is crumbling. Go on, Alex encouraged, pulling out his phone to take notes. I'd focus on wraparound services, food security, mental health support, family stability programs. Kids can't learn effectively when they're hungry or stressed about basic survival. And I'd make sure any solutions were developed with input from the communities they're meant to serve, not imposed from above by people who've never experienced the problems firsthand. Alex typed rapidly as she spoke, his expression growing more animated with each suggestion. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need. We've been approaching this from a technology-first perspective when we should have started with human needs. You're already doing more than most people in your position, Maya pointed out. The fact that you're asking these questions means you're on the right track. Alex looked up from his phone, and Maya was surprised by the intensity in his eyes. Would you consider consulting on this project? We could use someone with your perspective and expertise. I know you're busy with your dissertation, but this could be part-time, flexible schedule, and we'd pay you consultant rates. Maya felt something flutter in her chest that might have been excitement or might have been terror. The opportunity to influence real policy, to help shape programs that could affect thousands of children, was exactly the kind of meaningful work she had dreamed about during late-night study sessions. But accepting would mean becoming financially dependent on Alex in a way that could complicate their personal relationship beyond repair. I appreciate the offer, Maya said carefully, but I'm not sure it's a good idea to mix business with whatever this is between us. What if we kept them completely separate? Alex asked quickly. You'd work with Sarah and the education team directly. I'd recuse myself from any decisions about your compensation or role. We could establish clear boundaries. Maya studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or pressure, but found only genuine enthusiasm for her ideas. The professional opportunity was tempting, but she had learned to be wary of situations that seemed too good to be true. Let me think about it, she said finally. This is a big decision, and I don't want to rush into something that could complicate things between us. Of course, Alex said, though she could see disappointment flash across his features. Take all the time you need. The offer will be there when you're ready, regardless of what happens between us personally. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Sarah entered with an apologetic expression and a stack of papers that looked urgent. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the board meeting was moved up to 4 o'clock, and you need to review these quarterly reports before then, Sarah said, handing Alex the documents. Also, your mother called. Twice. She wants to confirm dinner plans for Sunday. Alex's entire demeanor shifted at the mention of his mother, tension creeping into his shoulders and jaw. Tell her I'll call her back in an hour. And reschedule the board meeting if possible. I have plans this afternoon. The meeting can't be moved, Sarah said gently. 3 board members are flying out tonight, and we need their approval on the Q3 budget allocations. Maya watched this exchange with growing understanding. She had seen Alex relaxed and open during their private time together, but this was a glimpse of the pressure he faced daily: competing demands, impossible schedules, family expectations that seemed to carry their own complicated weight. Go to your meeting, Maya said quietly. I understand that business comes first sometimes. It doesn't, Alex said firmly, turning away from Sarah to focus entirely on Maya. Not anymore. My father made that mistake, and I won't repeat it. Sarah, can you reschedule the meeting for tomorrow morning? Alex, Sarah said patiently. 3 board members specifically changed their travel plans for this meeting. Postponing will cost the company at least $50,000 in rebooking fees and delay the budget approval by a week. Maya felt the weight of Alex's attention, the way he was clearly struggling between professional obligation and personal desire. She had never wanted to be the kind of woman who demanded that a man choose between her and his responsibilities, but she also couldn't ignore the parallel to her father's endless prioritization of work over family. How long is the meeting? Maya asked Sarah. 2 hours, maybe 3 if there are complications, Sarah replied. Maya turned to Alex, who was watching her with an expression that suggested her response would determine something important about their future. I'll wait, she said simply. I brought a book, and I'm sure you have a comfortable chair somewhere where I can read until you're finished. The relief that flooded Alex's face was so profound that Maya realized she had made the right choice. This wasn't about enabling workaholism or accepting second place to business priorities. This was about understanding that sometimes compromise was necessary, and that flexibility could be a gift rather than a sacrifice. Sarah, can you set Maya up in the small conference room with whatever she needs? Coffee, snacks, Wi-Fi access? Alex asked, already loosening his tie further as he prepared to review the quarterly reports. Of course, Sarah said, her expression warming as she looked between them. Maya, would you like anything specific? We have an excellent espresso machine and pastries from a bakery downtown. Coffee and a quiet place to read sounds perfect, Maya said. Alex, go handle your business obligations. I'll be here when you're finished. Alex crossed to her in 3 quick strides and kissed her forehead softly, a gesture that felt both intimate and grateful. Thank you, he murmured against her skin. For understanding, for waiting, for being exactly who you are. Maya felt something warm and dangerous bloom in her chest, the recognition that she was falling deeper into feelings she hadn't planned to develop. Watching Alex navigate the competing demands of his professional life, seeing the weight of responsibility he carried and the thoughtful way he approached decisions that affected thousands of people, made it impossible to maintain the emotional distance she had tried to preserve. Sarah led her to a smaller conference room with comfortable chairs and natural light, setting her up with excellent coffee and an assortment of pastries that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Maya pulled out her novel and tried to focus on the familiar comfort of fiction, but her thoughts kept drifting to Alex and the complex reality of his world. She understood now why he ate alone at corner cafes and struggled with insomnia. The constant pressure of decision-making, the weight of other people's livelihoods, the endless parade of meetings and obligations. It was a life that left little room for spontaneity or genuine connection. The fact that he had carved out space for her, had prioritized their relationship even when it meant difficult conversations with his staff, suggested a level of commitment that both thrilled and terrified her. Through the glass walls of the conference room, Maya could see glimpses of the Sterling Industries machine in motion. People hurrying between meetings, analysts huddled over computer screens, executives making decisions that rippled out into the world in ways they might never fully understand. It was a level of impact and responsibility that she had never experienced personally, but she was beginning to appreciate the human cost of wielding such power. An hour into Alex's meeting, Maya's phone buzzed with a text message. How's the waiting going? Board meetings are even more boring than they sound. Promise to make it up to you with an excellent dinner. She typed back, reading is excellent waiting material. Take your time with the important decisions. I'm not going anywhere. "That's the best news I've had all week," came his immediate response, followed by a heart emoji that made Maya smile despite herself. Maya returned to her book, but found herself watching the building's rhythm instead of reading. She observed how people interacted in the hallways, the deference shown to certain executives, the way conversations shifted when senior staff approached. It was a complex ecosystem of power and influence, and Alex sat at the center of it all, making choices that affected not just the company but entire communities. When Sarah checked on her again, Maya asked about the company culture and employee satisfaction. She learned about comprehensive healthcare benefits, generous parental leave policies, and scholarship programs for employees' children. Sterling Industries wasn't perfect, but it seemed to be a company that tried to balance profit with social responsibility, something that had clearly been Alex's influence rather than inherited tradition. "He changed everything when he took over," Sarah confided as she refilled Maya's coffee. "The company was successful under his father, but it wasn't particularly principled. Alex restructured executive compensation to include social impact metrics, established environmental sustainability goals, and created employee ownership programs. Some of the old guard board members fought him every step of the way." "Is that why today's meeting is complicated?" Maya asked. Sarah glanced around to make sure they wouldn't be overheard, then nodded. "There's pressure to prioritize short-term profits over long-term sustainability initiatives. Alex has been fighting to maintain funding for programs that might not show immediate returns, but will create lasting positive change. It's an ongoing battle." Maya felt a surge of pride in Alex's principles, even as she recognized the stress such battles must create. Leading with integrity was always harder than leading with pure profit motives, but it was the kind of leadership the world desperately needed. When Alex finally emerged from his meeting 3 hours later, he looked exhausted but victorious. His tie had been completely abandoned, his sleeves were rolled up, and there was a satisfied gleam in his eyes that suggested the battle had gone his way. "Sorry for the wait," he said, settling into the chair across from Maya in the conference room. The meeting went better than expected, but it took longer to get everyone on the same page. "Good outcome?" Maya asked, closing her book and giving him her full attention. "Very good outcome. Full funding approval for the education initiative, plus additional resources for environmental sustainability projects and employee profit-sharing programs. We're going to be able to help a lot of people." Maya smiled, noting how Alex framed success in terms of impact rather than profit. "Congratulations. That sounds like exactly the kind of victory worth fighting for." "It is," Alex agreed, then leaned forward with renewed energy. "And it makes your potential involvement even more important. We have the resources approved, but we need someone with your perspective to help us use them effectively." Maya realized that her answer to his consulting offer had become more significant than a simple career decision. This was about whether she was willing to step into Alex's world in a meaningful way, whether she trusted him enough to blur the lines between personal and professional, whether she believed their relationship could survive the complications that kind of partnership would inevitably create. "Yes," she heard herself saying. "I'll do the consulting work, with clear boundaries and professional protocols, but yes." Alex's smile was brilliant enough to light the entire conference room. "Really? You're sure?" "I'm sure," Maya said, surprising herself with the confidence in her voice. "This is exactly the kind of work I've always wanted to do. If you're offering me the chance to make a real difference, I'd be crazy to turn it down just because the situation is complicated." "Thank you," Alex said softly, "for taking the risk, for trusting me, for saying yes to something that might change everything." Maya reached across the table and took his hand, noting again the calluses that spoke of harder work in his past. "Thank you for seeing something in me that's worth the investment. I promise I won't let you down." "Impossible," Alex said, lifting her hand to brush a soft kiss. 2 months into her consulting work with Sterling Industries, Maya found herself standing in the bathroom of an exclusive Manhattan restaurant, staring at her reflection and trying to calm her racing heart. Tonight was the night she would meet Alex's mother, a prospect that had seemed manageable in theory but felt terrifying in practice. The restaurant was the kind of place where reservations required weeks of advanced planning, and the prices weren't listed on the menu because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Maya had chosen her outfit carefully. A midnight blue dress that was elegant without being flashy, paired with her grandmother's pearls, and shoes that were comfortable enough for a long evening, but sophisticated enough to pass inspection. She checked her appearance one final time, noting the way anxiety had sharpened her features and made her eyes look larger than usual. The past 8 weeks had been a whirlwind of education committee meetings, school visits, and strategy sessions that had confirmed her decision to take on the consulting role. Working with Alex's team had been professionally fulfilling in ways she hadn't expected, but it had also intensified their personal relationship in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. They had maintained professional boundaries during business hours with careful discipline, but their private time together had deepened into something that felt dangerously close to love. Maya had never been someone who fell quickly or easily, but Alex had a way of seeing through her defenses to parts of herself she had forgotten existed. He listened to her ideas with genuine interest, challenged her thinking in ways that made her sharper, and supported her academic work with an enthusiasm that felt completely authentic. But meeting his mother felt like a different level of commitment, an acknowledgement that their relationship had moved beyond casual dating into territory that required family approval. Maya had learned enough about Eleanor Sterling over the past months to know that the woman was formidable, a former ambassador's daughter who had married into old money and spent 40 years managing her husband's political and business connections with ruthless efficiency. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Alex. Just finished parking. Mom's already here and asked for the corner table, so we'll have privacy for conversation. Fair warning, she's nervous too. The idea of Eleanor Sterling being nervous about anything seemed impossible, but Maya appreciated Alex's attempt to reassure her. She took one last deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked back into the dining room with as much confidence as she could muster. Alex stood as she approached the table, his relief visible when he saw her. He was wearing a navy suit that brought out his eyes and a tie that Maya recognized as one she had complimented weeks earlier. Across from him sat a woman who was clearly his mother, the same sharp cheekbones and intelligent eyes, but with silver hair pulled into an elegant chignon and the kind of posture that spoke of decades of formal dinner parties and charity galas. "Mother, this is Maya Johnson," Alex said, his voice carrying a warmth that suggested genuine affection for both women. "Maya, my mother, Eleanor Sterling." Eleanor rose gracefully and extended a perfectly manicured hand. "Maya, it's wonderful to finally meet you. Alexander has spoken of you so often that I feel I know you already." Maya shook the offered hand, noting Eleanor's firm grip and direct gaze. "Thank you for agreeing to dinner, Mrs. Sterling. I know how busy your schedule must be." "Eleanor, please," the older woman said, settling back into her seat. "And nonsense about busy schedules. Making time for the people who matter to my son is always a priority." They ordered wine, a bottle that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent, and made polite conversation about the restaurant, the weather, and New York's latest cultural exhibitions. Maya found herself relaxing slightly as Eleanor proved to be a skilled conversationalist who asked thoughtful questions and listened to answers with genuine attention. "Alexander tells me you're working on education initiatives with the company," Eleanor said once their appetizers arrived. "That must be fascinating work. I've always believed that education is the most powerful tool for social change." "It's been incredibly rewarding," Maya replied. "We're seeing real progress in the pilot schools, especially in terms of student engagement and teacher satisfaction. The combination of technology access and professional development support seems to be making a meaningful difference." "What specific changes have you observed?" Eleanor asked, leaning forward with apparent interest. Maya found herself describing the project in detail, from the initial research phase through implementation and early results. Eleanor asked insightful questions that demonstrated not only intelligence, but genuine understanding of educational policy challenges. Maya began to suspect that Alex's mother was far more than a social butterfly with good connections. "I served on the board of the American Education Foundation for 15 years, Eleanor explained when Maya commented on her expertise. "Education policy has been a passion of mine since before Alexander was born. I'm impressed by the comprehensive approach you've developed. Too many initiatives focus on either technology or teacher support without recognizing that both are necessary for sustainable change. Maya felt a flush of pride at the compliment, especially coming from someone with Eleanor's background and experience. Thank you. I think the key is remembering that education is fundamentally about relationships between teachers and students, between schools and communities, between current realities and future possibilities. Beautifully said, Eleanor murmured, and Maya caught the approving look she exchanged with Alex. Tell me about your academic background. Alexander mentioned you're completing a PhD. Maya described her dissertation research and academic goals, noting how Eleanor's questions revealed not just politeness, but genuine intellectual curiosity. The conversation flowed naturally from education to literature to social policy, and Maya found herself enjoying the discussion in a way she hadn't expected. Your research on grief and identity in contemporary fiction sounds fascinating, Eleanor said over the main course. I imagine the intersection of personal loss and cultural narrative must be particularly complex for marginalized communities. Maya paused with her fork halfway to her mouth, struck by the sophistication of Eleanor's observation. That's exactly right. The way grief is processed and expressed often depends on cultural context, family traditions, and community support systems. Mainstream literature sometimes treats loss as universal when it's actually deeply specific to individual and cultural experience. Have you considered publishing your dissertation research in accessible formats? Eleanor asked. Academic papers reach limited audiences, but these insights could benefit much broader communities if presented in formats that general readers could engage with. Maya glanced at Alex, who was watching their conversation with obvious pleasure. She had mentioned her dream of writing for general audiences during their early conversations, but she hadn't expected his mother to suggest similar possibilities. I've thought about it, Maya admitted, but transitioning from academic writing to popular publishing seems like a significant challenge. The audiences and expectations are so different. Less different than you might think, Eleanor said thoughtfully. Both require clear thinking and compelling presentation of ideas. The main difference is that popular writing demands even greater precision because you can't hide unclear thinking behind academic jargon. Maya felt something click into place, a recognition that Eleanor wasn't just making polite conversation, but offering genuine professional insight. Have you done much writing yourself? Eleanor smiled, and for the first time all evening, she looked almost bashful. I've published 3 books on international relations and diplomatic history. Nothing best-selling, but respectable contributions to policy discussions. I understand the challenges of making complex ideas accessible without oversimplifying them. Alex reached across the table and squeezed Maya's hand gently. I told you she'd like you, he said quietly, his eyes bright with affection for both women. The feeling is entirely mutual, Eleanor said warmly. Maya, I hope you won't think me presumptuous, but I have connections in academic publishing who might be interested in discussing transition strategies from dissertation to general audience books. If you'd like, I could arrange some informal conversations. Maya felt her heart skip with excitement and terror. The opportunity Eleanor was casually offering represented exactly the kind of career development she had dreamed about, but never imagined accessing. That would be incredible, but I wouldn't want to impose on your professional relationships. You wouldn't be imposing, Eleanor said firmly. You'd be offering value. These editors are always looking for fresh voices with important perspectives and strong research foundations. I suspect you'd be exactly what they're seeking. The conversation continued through dessert and coffee, ranging from travel stories to political observations to family memories that painted Alex in an unexpectedly endearing light. Maya learned that he had been a serious child who collected insects and built elaborate terrariums, that he had once written a 50-page business plan for a lemonade stand at age 10, and that he had insisted on learning to cook so he could prepare meals for his father during the older man's chemotherapy treatments. He's always been someone who shows love through action rather than words, Eleanor said, watching her son with obvious pride. Even as a child, he wanted to fix problems and take care of people. I think that's why he struggled so much with inheriting a company built around pure profit maximization. Mother, Alex protested, but his tone suggested affection rather than embarrassment. It's true, Eleanor continued, addressing Maya directly. His father was a brilliant businessman, but he never understood that success could be measured in ways beyond quarterly earnings. Alexander has been trying to balance honoring his father's legacy with building something that reflects his own values. Maya squeezed Alex's hand under the table, understanding now why her support had meant so much to him during the challenging board meetings and strategic planning sessions. He was trying to honor his father while becoming his own kind of leader, a balance that required enormous courage and patience. I think he's succeeding beautifully, Maya said quietly. The education initiative alone will affect thousands of children who might not otherwise have access to quality technology and teaching. That's a legacy worth building. Eleanor's smile was radiant. I couldn't agree more. And I suspect your influence has been instrumental in helping him think beyond traditional corporate philanthropy toward systemic change. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Eleanor turned to Maya with an expression of genuine warmth. My dear, I hope you'll join us for Sunday dinner soon. I'd love to continue our conversation about publishing, and I think you might enjoy meeting some of the other interesting people who gather around our table. I'd love that, Maya said, meaning it completely. Thank you for such a wonderful evening, and for all the professional insights. I feel like I've learned more in 3 hours than in months of career planning. Eleanor embraced her gently, the gesture feeling natural rather than performative. The pleasure was entirely mine. Alexander, you've chosen well. As Alex walked Maya to his car, she felt a lightness in her chest that had nothing to do with the expensive wine. Eleanor Sterling had been nothing like the intimidating socialite Maya had expected. Instead, she had proven to be an accomplished woman with genuine warmth and intellectual depth who seemed to approve wholeheartedly of her son's choice in romantic partners. That went well, Alex said with obvious relief as he started the car. I could see you two connecting over education policy and literature. Mother doesn't often find people who can match her intellectually, so she was clearly impressed. She's incredible, Maya said honestly. Brilliant, accomplished, warm, and unexpectedly down-to-earth. I can see where you get your combination of intelligence and genuine care for people. She liked you immediately, Alex said, pulling into traffic with practiced ease. I could tell by the way she started offering professional connections within the first hour. Mother only does that for people she considers family. Maya felt her chest tighten at the word family, the implications both thrilling and terrifying. She was falling deeper into Alex's world with each passing week, building connections and commitments that would be increasingly difficult to untangle if their relationship didn't work out. But as she watched Alex navigate the city streets with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on her knee, Maya realized that the fear of potential loss was being overshadowed by the joy of present connection. For the first time in her adult life, she was part of something that felt bigger than herself. Professionally meaningful work, genuine romantic love, and acceptance into a family that valued both achievement and character. What are you thinking about? Alex asked softly, glancing at her as they stopped at a red light. I'm thinking about how much my life has changed since I met you, Maya said honestly. 6 months ago, I was focused entirely on finishing my dissertation and avoiding complications. Now I'm consulting on education policy, meeting publishing contacts, and having dinner with your mother. It's wonderful and terrifying. Is the terrifying part bigger than the wonderful part? Alex asked, and Maya could hear the vulnerability beneath his casual tone. No, Maya said firmly, turning to face him fully. The wonderful part is definitely winning. I just need to keep remembering that some risks are worth taking. Alex smiled, the expression transforming his face from merely handsome to absolutely radiant. I love you, he said simply, the words falling into the space between them like stones dropped into still water. Maya felt her heart stop and restart, the world shifting around her as she processed what he had just said. She had suspected for weeks that they were moving toward those words, but hearing them spoken aloud made everything real in a way that was both beautiful and overwhelming. I love you too, she heard herself saying, and knew with absolute certainty that it was true. I love you too, Alexander Sterling, and that terrifies me more than anything I've ever felt. Good terrified or bad terrified? Alex asked, pulling over to the curb so he could give her his full attention. Good terrified, Maya said, reaching for his hands and holding them tightly. Terrified like standing at the edge of something beautiful and unknown, ready to jump. Alex leaned across the seat and kissed her softly, a promise of tenderness that tasted like expensive wine and infinite possibility. When they broke apart, Maya felt like she was glowing from the inside out, transformed by the simple magic of speaking love aloud and having it returned without reservation. So what happens now? Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Now we figure it out together, Alex said, brushing a strand of hair away from her face with gentle fingers. One day at a time, one decision at a time, one beautiful risk at a time. Maya smiled, feeling the last of her careful defenses crumble in the face of such honest affection. She was no longer the woman who ate alone in corner cafes, protecting herself from disappointment through careful distance. She was someone who had chosen love despite all the complications, someone brave enough to build a life that included another person's dreams alongside her own. As Alex drove her home through the glittering city night, 1 year later, Maya stood in the same corner cafe where everything had begun, but this time she wasn't alone. Alex sat across from her, sharing a blueberry muffin and terrible coffee while they planned the launch event for her first book. The morning sun streamed through windows that had witnessed the beginning of their love story, creating patterns of light and shadow that felt like coming full circle. I still can't believe it's real, Maya said, holding up the advance copy of her book. From Grief to Grace: How Loss Shapes Identity in Contemporary America. The cover featured her name in elegant typography, and seeing it in print still made her heart race with excitement and disbelief. Believe it, Alex said, his pride evident in every word. You've worked incredibly hard for this moment. The book is brilliant, the early reviews are fantastic, and the launch event is going to be perfect. Maya smiled, thinking about how much had changed since that morning when Alex had first sat down at her table uninvited. The book had grown out of her dissertation research, but had been transformed through Eleanor's mentoring and connections into something that spoke to general audiences about universal experiences of loss and recovery. It was scheduled to release in 3 months, with a launch party planned at one of Manhattan's most prestigious literary venues. They felt the future spreading out before them like an uncharted map, full of possibilities that were both thrilling and uncertain, but worth exploring together with courage, honesty, and the kind of love that felt strong enough to weather whatever challenges lay ahead. The girl who had once preferred solitude had found something better than safety. She had found partnership, purpose, and the terrifying, wonderful courage to let her carefully ordered life become beautifully complicated by love. Cross her knuckles. You've never let anyone down a day in your life. As they left Sterling Industries together, Maya felt the weight of the decision she had just made settling around her like a new coat. Unfamiliar, but potentially perfect if she could learn to wear it with confidence. She was stepping into Alex's world in a way that would change both their personal relationship and her professional future, but for the first time in years, uncertainty felt like possibility rather than threat. Maybe Rosa had been right about food bringing people together, but perhaps shared purpose was an even stronger foundation for lasting connection. Maybe this beautiful, complicated man with his impossible schedule and genuine heart was worth the risk of letting her carefully ordered life become beautifully chaotic. Maya squeezed Alex's hand as they walked toward his car, ready to discover what they could build together with honesty, good intentions, and the terrifying, wonderful courage to choose each other despite all the reasons why it might be the most dangerous decision either of them had ever made. As she got ready for bed, Maya caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror and was surprised by what she saw. Her eyes were bright with excitement instead of their usual careful wariness, and her smile looked like it belonged to someone who believed in possibility instead of someone who had learned to expect disappointment. Maybe Rosa was right about food bringing people together. Maybe one dinner could lead to something neither of them had expected to find. Maybe sometimes the most dangerous choice was also the most necessary one. Maya fell asleep that night thinking about brown eyes and gentle hands, about terrible wine and perfect pasta, and about the terrifying, wonderful possibility that her carefully ordered life was about to become beautifully complicated. Maybe one dinner wouldn't hurt. Maybe she could satisfy her curiosity about this strange, sad billionaire who ate alone in corner cafes and still remembered what it felt like to worry about rent. Maybe she could even help him figure out how to carry the weight of his father's legacy without losing himself in the process. Maya opened her book and tried to return to the familiar comfort of fiction, but her thoughts kept drifting to brown eyes and Italian leather shoes, to the promise of carbonara and terrible wine, and to the possibility that sometimes the most dangerous adventures began with the simplest invitations. Outside the cafe window, morning rushed past in a blur of honking cars and hurried pedestrians. But Maya felt suspended in a moment of perfect possibility, where anything could happen and nothing was certain except the warmth of unexpected connection and the sweet terror of stepping outside the safe boundaries she had built around her heart.